Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're back in War Thunder having a video looking at the Advocation for the HA140, but before we do that I do have some quick news to show you. So we've made a new design at the TEC store. It's called Huey's on the Horizon, and you can get it with the text Bring the Thunder or without the text. For me personally, I think this is the best design that we've ever created, and you'll see pictures in front of you. If you want to order this design, you can go to either our NA or EU store. Both links are in the description. On top of this, if you are outside of these regions, you can still order it, but just understand that the postal, charges may be a little bit different. But as I said, I personally think this is our best design yet. You can get it on any shirt color you want. You can get it on cups. You can get it on, stickers. And if there are any other things that you would like, such as different styles of shirts or maybe even a rug or something like that, all you have to do is let us know on the TEC Hub Discord, which you'll also find a link in the description for. Anyway, let's get into the main thrust of the video, the HA140. So, where did this idea come from? Well, in the last week or so, the Kingfishers, or the OS2Us, have been introduced once again into War Thunder, and the reason for this, or at least it seems that the reason for this is because they now have a place in the game, in naval forces. They are a float plane. They can capture zones, they can carry bombs, they have a little gun on them. You can see where they kind of fit in the game. Well, if that's the case, if the OS2U is allowed in the game, then I thought I would have a look at similar vehicles from other nations. Now, the HA140 is very much a German equivalent of the Kingfisher. There are other ones that we may talk about in the future that came out from Germany, which are, similar to the Kingfisher and how it was used, but I think the HA140 for me, it gives me a good platform to expand on the history of, what was going on and all of that wonderful stuff. So, let's get into the history of this plane. So, the summer of 1935, the RLM went to two companies. And by the way, just before we start this, I am going to butcher a lot of German words here. I will put them on the screen for you so you can see them for yourself, but I apologize in advance. I have been talking to a lot of German people to help with my, sorting out the words and how to say them. I'm nowhere near. I'm English, it is how it is. But anyway, I apologize in advance to any Germans who are watching this. Anyway, so the two companies that were taught to by the RLM was Hamburger Flugzeeugbau and HEINKEL Flugzeugwerke. They were asked for proposals to meet a specification for a twin-engined maritime reconnaissance and torpedo bombing seaplane. Now, who are these two companies? You may have heard of Heinkel before, but who is Hamburger Flugzeeugbau? Well, HA, as known for short, they were established in 1933 as an offshoot of BLOHM and VOSS shipbuilders. So, they later became an operating division within its parent company, known as ABTEILUNG Flugzeugbau der SCHIFFSWERFT, BLOHM and VOSS, from 1937 until the end of World War II, where they ceased operations. So, anything made before 1937 has the name HA, after Hamburger Flugzeugbau, and after BV for BLOHM and VOSS. So the main reason why they changed the name, it seems to be because of brand recognition. So since they changed the name from the outset, people either already knew it was from BLOHM and VOSS or were confused when they found out. So the decision was made to put them all under the same umbrella. So as you can see, Hamburger Flugzeugbau is the company that was created by BLOHM and VOSS to get into aircraft building. And one of the main reasons why they did this was it was seen that BLOHM and VOSS at the time, they weren't exactly struggling, but what they were running into was shortness of contracts. So they wanted to explore different areas to try and get some more contracts to be able to increase cash flow. So that is why they created Hamburger Flugzeugbau and then eventually just called it, Abteilung Flugzeugbau der SCHIFFSWERFT, BLOHM and VOSS. Now, some of the examples of these aircraft made by Hamburger Flugzeugbau are the HA-137. This was a dive bomber prototype. then the HA-136, which was an all-metal monoplane, and then the HA-138, which was a twin-boom flying boat. There was only one aircraft, which was under the HA name, that could be classed as a production aircraft and not a prototype, and this is the HA-139, which was used to carry long-distance mail. So everything else was pretty much just a prototype, and what that meant was there was a lot of designs going along, but not a lot of contracts won by, this company. So, who's the other company? Ernst Heinkel Flugzeugwerke, or Heinkel. You may have recognized the name. So, this company was established in 1922 by Ernst Heinkel after being a chief designer for the Hansa Brandenburg aviation firm, and this was made possible by the reallocation of the Versailles Treaty. Basically, Germany, when they either went to negotiate or they personally decided just to say screw it to some of the principles of the Versailles Treaty, and this meant that Germany was allowed to at least have some part in some sort of air force. If you've ever read the initial drafts of the Versailles Treaty, they were incredibly restrictive on what we would class as modern warfare at the time after World War I, and aircraft were seen at that time as modern warfare. So when these were relaxed, the Ernst Heinkel Flugzeugwerke came into existence. So it was one of the major players in the German aviation industry all the way from the early 1930s to the end of 1945. And here are some examples of the aircraft made by Ernst Heinkel Flugzeugwerke. So you have the HE-112, which was a fighter aircraft. It lost the Luftwaffe's fighter contract in 1933 to the Messerschmitt Bf-109. The HE-111, which was a medium bomber and was most recognized German bomber, at least at the start of the war, since it had that interesting design. And then the HE-177, which was a long-range heavy bomber, which was pretty much the only one of its kind to be mass-produced in Germany. All three of these we already have in-game. All of these aircraft and others, such as the HE-51, they were actually designed by two lads, Siegfried and Walter Gunther. Unfortunately, Walter was killed in a car crash in 1937, though, but his brother continued on to design machines like the HE-177. So, even though you have, Ernst Heinkel behind a lot of this, the brainchild, or the brains behind a lot of these designs came from Siegfried and Walter Gunther. So those are the two guys you want to actually look at if you want to, see a lot of these designs. So what happened? So in September of 1935, so after they were asked, Richard Vought, who was chief designer at HA, and his team submitted the design called Project 19 and to the Reichsluftfahrtministerium. Now, I know I've pronounced that wrong. It's the RLM, or it's the Ministry of Aviation in Nazi Germany, if you want to make heads or tails of it. So these were alongside other proposals, such as a land-based version of the same aircraft, the Project 19A. And the main difference between the designs is that the 19A had a fully retractable undercarriage, whereas the other one obviously had floats. It was supposed to be a seaplane. So Vought loved the idea of wings of the inverted gull form, and he also decided that the machine would be powered by two Junkers JUMO 210 12-cylinder liquid-cooled engines. Now, if you want to know what other famous machines actually use these engines, it's the same engines as the early Bf-109s, so I believe it's like the A to D versions, if I read it correctly. Then you have the HE-112 used this, and then the early Bf-110s also used these engines. So these were widely used, widely popular, seemed to be good at their job. So the 1st of November 1935 came around, and an official order was placed for 3 prototypes under the designation of HA-140. So they brought their designs to the RLM. RLM said, yep, this looks good, make us some stuff. So in the early stages of the design development, so this is, they've got the original project. Now they're expanding on it to try and make it a real life thing. There were a few changes made to the overall design. So the wingspan was increased by around 4 foot, and after some model tests, it was decided to eliminate the coarse anhedral angle of the inbound wing panels, and instead a straight center section was adopted, and the dihedral of the outer panels being markedly reduced. Because of these changes, the weight was increased, and the JUMO or the JUMO 210s was seen as not powerful enough, so the engines were changed for the mock-up plane to the 9-cylinder radial BMW 132K. Now this is a license-built Pratt & Whitney Hornet engine, so actually an American engine, which gave it a bit more oomph. After these changes, we got ourselves the first prototype, the HA140V1. It flew for the first time on September the 30th, 1937, and this was a month after its competitor, the HE115, which we may actually do another video on. And it was flown to the ERPROBUNGSSTELLE, I think is how you say that, at Travemünde, late in December for official trials. So shortly after its arrival at Travemünde, the HA140V1 actually suffered an accident when, while alighting on rough water, the starboard float dipped, and its forward structure failing and the tip bending upwards, and this actually struck the aircrew, of all things, and the impact partly tore the starboard engine from its bearers, and debris flung up by the aircrew punctured the fuselage nose. So the HA140V1 was replaced in the Travemünde test program by the second prototype, the HA140V2. So the HA140V1 got there, but it didn't survive landing because one of its, let's call them pontoons, fell apart. So the HA140V1 and V2, they differed not really in any major respect. So they were both powered by the BMW 132Ks, rated at 800 horsepower for takeoff and 830 horsepower at 3,280 feet. They were all metal construction, and also the cantilever wing had a single main load carrying tubular spar, the center portion of which was sealed and divided into 5 individual fuel tanks, and flush riveted metal skinning. So the fuselage was the center of it had the smallest fuel tank. So basically what you had was a set of 5 fuel tanks, 2 on each side of the wing, and then the center would be the small fuel tank as well. So the fuselage itself was a monocoque built up from crossbrains and longitudinal stringers, the main bulkheads being heavy box frames, and the 2 all-metal cantilever floats were attached to the extremities of the center section portion of the main spar by vertical tubular steel stubs enclosed by streamlined fairings. So each float had a central Wagner beam extending almost its entire length and was divided by 7 watertight bulkheads. So as you can see, that is the general structure of the machine, and since the V1 and the V2 were pretty much the same, just one broke and one didn't, this is basically what came to party when it came to the HA140. So what about the armament on this thing? Well, the proposed armament comprised of a 7.9mm, an MG15 machine gun in the nose, and this possessing somewhat limited traverse and firing through a slot in a small glazed cupola, and a similar weapon for the rear defense fired by the radio cupola, and a similar weapon from a sliding dorsal hatch. So if you imagine like a glass turret on the top with a machine gun pointing out, that would be the front one, and then the back one would be similar, much more to what you would see from, let's say, the Uhu, with how that actually works. So the internal weapons bay could accommodate a single torpedo or 4 551-pound bombs, and the crew comprised of 3 members. So that is basically what you're looking at for this design. Then there was a third prototype, the HA-140V3. This wasn't completed until late 1938, so we're talking about quite a long time since the start of this. This differed from its predecessors in embodying slats, which occupied the entire leading edges of the wing outer panels, some local structural reinforcement, and the nose gun cupola was deleted. So it was created basically to be more streamlined. The HA-140V3 was delivered to Travemünde on May the 11th, 1939, but BLOHM and VOSS was already aware that no production contract was forthcoming. So I've actually heard a lot of sites on the internet say that the HA-140 actually won the contract, but BLOHM and VOSS did not have the facilities to actually produce this. I have no idea where this idea has come from, but all of the old books I've read, just none of, this information just isn't true in them. Like, for them, they lost the contract. Like, it was as simple as that. I don't know where this idea that BLOHM and VOSS didn't have the capacity to build these things. They definitely did. If you look at the production halls that they actually had, which just seems very odd. I want to know where the source for that actually comes from. So the Technische Amt, having selected the HE-115 to fulfill its specification as early as of 1938. So they basically made the V3 in vain, and also maybe for projects going forward. So the HA-140 development continuing only as a backup program. So the performance of the two aircraft was closely comparable, but the HE-115 possessed exceptionally fine water handling qualities and good stability throughout its speed range. The characteristics of the HA-140, both on the water and in the air, left something to be desired. So pretty much the HE-115 just felt better to the test pilots and whoever was actually, doing it at the time. So on the September 21st, 1939, the HA-140 program was officially terminated. So this would be the day where you could say the HA-140 was never going to produce. But that isn't the end of the story. There is still stuff to come. So the HA-140V3, it was returned to BLOHM and VOSS for use as an aerodynamic testbed. And before the end of 1939, the aircraft was flying with a reduced scale model of the vertical tail surfaces vertical tail surfaces of the BV-222. Which was mounted above the fuselage. So during the course of 1940, the same aircraft was once again modified, and this time to test the novel variable incidence wing. This venturesome feature being intended for application for the BV-144 medium-range transport, which was under development for the DLH. So even though this thing never saw combat, was never fully produced, you could see that it had areas where it actually contributed to the war effort. The tubular main load carrying spar concepts of Vogt, who was the chief designer in the first place, lent itself admirably to the pivoting of the wing, and the HA-140V3 was adapted so that the outboard wing panels could be pivoted through 9 degrees by means of 2 electrically operated screw jacks. So no details were available of the results of the variable incidence wing tests conducted on the HA-140V3, but the fact that they must have enjoyed a measure of success is indicated by the placing of an order of 2 BV-144 prototypes in 1942. So a lot of people would say this is a failed project, and I would agree. It didn't win the contract it meant to actually win. But what it did was that it tested some interesting concepts. So first of all, radio turrets. This is something that the Germans were developing before the war even started, and the fact that it was used in this is incredibly interesting. Also, on top of this, the electrically operated screw jacks. If you are unfamiliar with these, I would definitely say go and have a look. It is, I know a lot of people would say it's pretty much over-engineering at the time, but I still think it is kind of interesting. On top of all of this, for the HA-140 V2 specification, the armament on it was one 7.9mm MG15 in the nose cupola and one 7.9mm looking backwards, and a whole bomb load of around about 2,000 pounds. So if this is ever put into game, you could see the use for it, right? It can carry a torpedo, it can capture zones in naval forces, it has a little bit of defense on it, not a lot, but enough, and it's very, very similar to the Kingfisher, if not even more important than it, even more better than it. And this design eventually was used to be able to develop other machines such as the BV222. I think this is a slam dunk if we compare it to the Kingfisher. If we want a slightly better aircraft, then of course you throw in the HE-115, but today we're talking about the HA-140, and as somebody who personally doesn't exactly like a lot of BLOHM and VOSS designs, I think that this one, since it was built, since it was tested, since it worked, it should be put in the game just to give the name its recognition. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.